Fantastic. Bernard, thank you again for joining us for the Islam Unraveled Foundation for a Path Forward Anti-Racism podcast. And we really appreciate you joining us previously on a call with many of our leaders from the Muslim community to share best practices from the Jewish Federation and the various synagogues throughout the Lower Mainland on security. And that was very helpful for our community, and we're moving towards next steps to make that happen. Sadly, we're living in a world today where we have to really have departments look after safety and security for our communities, but what we appreciate is this allyship, this work together on a common cause for peace and security for all people. So Bernard, thank you again for joining us. So
my pleasure.
Bernard, you're a very accomplished person. I was reading your background as a lawyer in corporate finance with Clark Wilson, and then also as a chair for the Jewish Federation, which does a lot of great work within Canada as well as around the world. So before we go into that, maybe we can talk about your personal journey of kind of what brought you to, one, your significant career in law, and then to also, it seems like hand in hand or maybe in equal measure in your community service. What drove that for you as a personal journey?
Well, thanks for asking and thanks for having me here. It's been quite a journey. I actually kind of fell into law. I was born and raised in Winnipeg, and my father was a Holocaust survivor and who immigrated to Canada in 1948 after spending almost 4 years in a displaced persons camp. So I guess that background and the fact that my father was not hesitant to talk about his experiences, although for children, when we were small, he kept them not too terrifying, but he did talk about having lived in the forests of Poland for 3 years and how he slept and how he was able to eat, collecting berries and learning about the forests and getting help from some others and having to forage really for food. It made me feel a connection to that. And as I got older, of course, I realized the reason for the whole war and the displacement of all those persons was just hatred. I guess that I didn't think of it explicitly though in those terms at that age, at the young age, but I think it always resonated with me. I was sort of a normal kid, as normal as you could be. I was growing up in an immigrant, partially immigrant family, and so I knew that immigrants were common, and they were all sorts of immigrants in Winnipeg, including the Jewish community, which I was part of, and went to school and just tried to fit in, and like all kids do. At university, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but my sister got into law school ahead of me. She's almost 3 years older. And then I thought, okay, I'll try, but I didn't really know that I wanted to do it. And but once I was accepted, I said, well, I don't really know anything else I'd rather do. So I went to law school, and then it turned out to be a wonderful calling for me. And I've enjoyed it, and I've been called to the bar in British Columbia for over 41 years after articling. And so I've really had a good time of it. And it's been a wonderful platform and a good living for me. So it's been great. My community service really started after I got to Vancouver. I got here in 1979 and really wasn't particularly involved until 1981. And then in 1981, I sort of got involved with one of the organizations, which was called Canadian Jewish Congress, which existed at the time. And and wanted to do things in the Jewish community that, if I could, that would help the community. And of course, a legal training, as you're right, goes hand in hand a little bit with being able to lead from a governance point of view. And I was still quite young, but there was a youth, not a youth, but a young adult group, which I joined and sort of grew with that. And over the years, I've really stayed involved in the community, and then beyond the community as well. I think what's great about getting involved in the first place in any entry point is it often leads to other reasons and other areas where a person does get involved. So my Jewish community involvement had led me to community involvement with other important causes, like raising funds for to combat diseases, or I was, even when I was quite young, we in Winnipeg, we had something called the March for Millions, which people had to walk 35 miles in a day and raise money doing that. And I did it in my teens a couple of times. 35 miles is a long way to walk when you're 14 or 15 years old. But you go to people and ask them, would you sponsor me if I do this? And a lot of people did. So it was quite quite sore the next day, but it was quite the learning experience to think that you can accomplish something for society by challenging yourself to do something important. And of course, it's very common today that people do bike races and all kinds of other challenges, and they raise money on that basis, and it's very successful. That was kind of the early part of that.
And would you say that some of the values, like with the Jewish Federation, Tikkun Olam, repairing the world, and forgive my pronunciation, tzedakah, justice and charity, halal Israel, the unity of the Jewish people, and chesed, loving kindness, and so caring, excellence, collaboration, efficiency. It's a heartfelt work.
Well, first of all, let me say I'm very impressed with the amount of research you've done, and you've done a very, very good job. Yes, so all those phrases are Hebrew, and you mentioned Klal Yisrael, which is sort of all Israel sort of first cares for each other. I think if you start in concentric circles about caring and taking care of each other, and you can make your circles kind of bigger and bigger as you go along, you're doing wonderful work. I mean, first of all, you take care of yourself and your family, but then perhaps if you're able to, you expand that concentric circle to a little larger group, which becomes maybe your extended family, and then it becomes your co-religionists or others on your block, whether they be your religion or not, or others in your city or others in your country. And I think it is a very important, and it's certainly taught through Jewish learning, that tzedakah, which really means both charity and justice in the same word, and chesed, which means loving kindness, kind of, it is not exact translation for it, but chesed kind of includes charity, includes caring, it includes loving other people, and loving sounds like a strong word, but it means caring enough about them to want to do something to support them. And those things are terms that Jews who study Jewish studies learn about and know that it's very, very important. And Tikkun Olam, of course, is, and you pronounce that very well, by the way, is repair of the world. And it's not limited to anybody or anything. It's saying this world is something that we need to continually work on and fix and help repair and make it better. And I mean, those who are religious believe that, that humans are in a partnership with God, and that God created the world, and it's our job to get to the details and get to the issues that are facing the world in terms of injustice, in terms of people becoming sick, in terms of virtually anything that detracts from someone having opportunities in life, health, welfare. All those things can fit into tikkun olam. How can we make things better?
And I was reading that some of the work with the former Soviet Union in rural areas of Russia and elderly people of Jewish origin, to help them and to get resources and to be of service, and obviously that's a lot of concern, and looking at it, even as you said, with your father being a displaced person at that time, we met with a Syrian refugee who had to leave from Syria and was at a refugee camp in Jordan. And she says, and she's a young person, she's now, I think, 19. And she said, to even have something to lean on is a luxury, to lean against something, because she was intense. And so I'm sure like part of that empathy is by hearing the stories from your father of survival, and really that survival also has to be with other people, that there's a brotherhood, a sisterhood, a way to help each other survive. And especially in the aftermath or during World War II, the uncertainty, the fear, and obviously the persecution is very real, and to survive, and then and everyone's concerned about their family, their future generations, and to get safe harbor. And so I'm sure a lot of the great work is again to empathize with the past. That shows empathy for the future, or the current, present, and for the future of the community. And would you say that some of the lessons that were learned really inform the kind of wider community that because of those experiences, those shared kind of stories from what happened to your parents, and would you say a lot of your colleagues also share the same type of experiences, and they want to pay it forward, that we want to help because we saw that people helped our previous generations, and we want to do the same?
Well, yes and no. I mean, look, just like everybody, Jews are exactly the same. Some of them care deeply about others, some don't. Yeah. And it's always, but enough of the organized community. I think the organized community is always trying to make things better and reach out to others. And I think the organized community organizes itself and is made up of people who do want to help others and do want to care. And I guess it's, some people are, concerned only with their own families, just like anybody or any religion and any group. You've got some kind of these kinds and some kind of those kinds, but really, I think the people who are organized and do it for a reason, and the reason that they create organizations is generally to help others, and the reason that they get together with others is to supply, to also protect themselves, to be part of something. It's sort of human nature to be involved with a group. But once the group gets organized, they're usually looking for another reason to exist other than just be a group of like-minded people. And so most of the Jewish organizations, many of them have been created around helping others, which is why we have some very successful organizations around services to the poor, and services to those who have specific problems like addictions or other medical issues, and which is why you see Jewish names on buildings that are built by the hospitals, for example, because people do care and they are concerned and they do want to do good. You were mentioning about the former Soviet Union and places like that. We're helping people. I was very, because I've been involved for many years, I was privileged to be able to go to the former Soviet Union. I was in Kiev and I was in St. Petersburg with Jewish organizations who were supporting people there. And it's interesting what they do there. It's through something called the Joint Distribution Committee, which was started in the United States. Jews from all over the world support a community center where people have activities and they get food and they get medical equipment. And it turns out that, you know, and visiting them, I could see that, yes, basically it was set up by the Jewish community for the Jewish community, but there's a lot of people, probably more than half, who are not Jewish, who get the support that the Jewish community gets, because, you know, people have their, you know, if somebody's very poor and, for example, can't afford eyeglasses, and they see their neighbor down the street who's Jewish get eyeglasses because they need them, and they say, well, where can I get them? So they take them along and they say, yes, you know, you can put, and nobody asks, are you Jewish or not? But, you know, it says it's a Jewish organization. It says it's a Jewish building, but people will say, hey, I need help too. So yes, come in. You can have the meals. There's actually people who get meals sent to them twice a week, hot meals, and they're actually delivered. And I'm sure that was staged, but we were there visiting someone when somebody showed up and knocked on the door with 2 hot meals and gave it to the person who lived there as she was telling us about her life. I mean, the life there is very difficult, especially for seniors, because the former Soviet Union, it kind of collapsed, and all the if they'd been working all their lives, they had a pension, but the value of the pension went down so much, was deflated, that they really couldn't even afford food, never mind their rent. And you had people who had, you know, a 2-bedroom apartment might have 3 families in it, right? One in the living room and one in the 1 bedroom and one in the other bedroom. And so it was crowded and it was very difficult. And the seniors in particular had a difficult time. So we were very gratified and pleased to see that not only are thousands of people served in all these communities, but, as I say, the whole community was served, not just the Jewish community, even though it's a Jewish initiative, because we see and know that this is a need, not only for us, but for everyone. And I think everyone is good with it. They're happy that there are people being served, and it's very gratifying to be able to do that kind of good, and to see it firsthand, of course, makes you want to even do more if you can, which is great. I mean, I guess that's why they have these missions to dip to various places where you can actually see how your funds are being spent. It really does make you want to do more.
Absolutely. And you talked earlier about addiction, and I'm sure mental health and these are areas of help that people do need in addition to material food or shelter. And with the work in addiction or mental health, please talk about some of the work there to help people that are going through addiction and mental health issues. And addiction is a mental health issue. And as you said, people have differing views about people that have addiction, and some have no sympathy for people with addiction, but it now becomes a health issue and a mental health issue. So there's a lot of ways to look at it, but please tell me your perspective.
Well, I mean, in our community, in the Jewish community, we have 2 organizations that deal with mental health issues and addiction. One specifically is called JACS, which is Jewish Addiction Counseling. So there's an organization which has an executive director, which sees and helps provide counseling for addicts. And I know that when it comes to addiction, you kind of need two major things. One is a place to stop using whatever addictive substance you're using. For example, if you're an alcoholic, you need to dry out and then take the counseling. And we don't have. I mean, it's very difficult to get into places that it's a very specialized thing. So our community doesn't have anything special for actually helping people stop and go through the addiction drying out process but once they get out of that, once they've just made a decision, then they can go to Jewish to Jack's organization, and they'll help with counseling whenever a person needs. And it's been successful. It's got a relatively modest budget, but it tries to help. And again, it's not only Jews who can go there. It's counseling supplied by the community, and it's meant for Jewish addicts, but other people can come too. And then there's Jewish Family Services, which is a very large organization which does a lot of different things, including counseling and including helping find people employment, including now they've opened up a food hub on the east side of Vancouver, and they're going to be supplying people with food. They ran the food bank. It's still part of the food bank, but now they're going to, the organized community was able to raise enough funds to rent a place, have a kitchen there where people can actually make food together and serve. And those who are receiving can also be giving, because they can cook, and they can volunteer their time there, and they're going to have gardens. And one of the wonderful things about an organization like that is that if you can give people who are receiving the dignity of being able to give back in some ways by volunteering their time, of course, they feel much better, and it gives them self-esteem, and it makes them valuable and interested members of the community.
We also have a similar organization on the downtown east side called the Muslim Care Center, and we do provide the food services as well. But I do like that approach to have the people also give as a self-esteem booster, and that's a very powerful way to bring people that need help. And I'm sure when people are there and you talk to the people, you understand there's a story behind what happened. There was maybe a death in the family, some abuse, or something happened. Not everybody intends to be there, and then they are, whether it's opioids, whether it's drugs or alcohol, they're medicating some sort of pain. And so I think when people just see the result of what's on the surface, they don't see there's years of something that's happened, and in case of First Nations, generational trauma. And so by speaking to people and understanding them, you understand it's much deeper and broader, and you have more compassion. As you said, when you're there on the front lines to help people, you understand it much deeper than if you just read about it.
Very well said. And you're right that there really is a story behind the poverty. There's a story behind the addiction, and all of us probably may have reacted in a similar fashion had we been going through the same circumstance. I mean, I certainly have admiration for people who are strong enough to fight through some of the issues and problems that they face, and not turn to addiction or other things. But not all of us are built the same way. As I said before, everyone's different. Every community has a wide variety of types of people and people who have different strengths and different abilities and weaknesses and vulnerabilities. And so, are we going to take people as they are, or are we going to judge them? And if you can give them a helping hand, as best you can, and they can hopefully make something out of that. Not everyone can, but hopefully most will.
I'll share a story with you about meaningful help as well. We have a chiropractor who has a practice, and he has a nonprofit called a House Call for Humanity. And so in friendship and conversations, we talked about his patients that had drug and alcohol addiction problems. And it was originally, the addiction happened because of physical pain, whether it was some injury or a car accident. And so to medicate, they would start drinking more or taking certain drugs or opioids or painkillers, and then they became dependent. And so when he started doing his chiropractic work on his patients, then a large percentage, because the pain, the actual underlying cause, the physical pain, was relieved after a number of weeks and months of treatment, that they stopped having to rely on the drugs and alcohol. And so we piloted this before the pandemic on the downtown east side with people that, again, you could see they had physical, the limp, the kind of hunch, pain. And we did that for, I would say, several dozen people, and we did it twice. And there was one case that was really powerful. Like some of the people, for their ability to walk or stand up. And one young person was on the downtown east side because he couldn't work because his back was just in terrible condition. And so after 2 or 3 sessions, the problem was more or less relieved. And he sent us a message that he got a job because he wanted to work, but he just physically was just not able to. And by this kind of specific support to help him get him literally back on his feet, he got back on his feet and he was able to start working. So sometimes there are underlying issues that are literally a disability, and certain unique approaches like we can all strategize on to help people in, again, a meaningful way to get literally back up on the feet. And so I think part of our discussion, how we met, was sharing stories, sharing best practices, sharing kind of learnings. And sadly, we're living in a world today where hatred and racism is actually probably increasing at a rate because of the internet, much more than it ever has in history. And so now, maybe in wrapping the previous subject, if you have any comments, and then we can dive into the hairy details of
security. Right.
Exactly.
Well, yeah. First of all, let me say that I enjoyed your example, and it just it just shows you that really all the things we do to try to help people and to try to win people over are really done on one person at a time. And I think it almost results, it's almost on every front. It's almost one, I mean, people who are racist, you have to sort of win them over one at a time. And it's long, hard work, which I guess why we keep saying Tikkun Olam, repairing the world. It doesn't, it just doesn't happen with one fix and a snap of your fingers and everything's good again. It unfortunately takes constant work by us as human beings to continually work on whatever it needs to be fixed. So, and each one person is a victory. I mean, there's a saying in Hebrew from our sages that if you save one life, it's like saving the whole world. And it's true in the sense that you have to save the whole world one person at a time. And that's hopefully what our communities can do together. Right. So security. Should I just launch into that? Is that?
Actually, I just wanted to echo that. Always, I feel like deja vu when I'm in the company of Jewish friends, because we have similar things in the Islamic tradition. So we have one. If you take one life, it's like taking the life of the entire mankind, and if you save a life, it's like saving the entire mankind. And so there's very similar. And just maybe to preface going into security, yesterday actually had a call with Rabbi Philip Bregman, who's the Rabbi Emeritus from Temple Shalom and formerly of Hillel. And about 10, 12 years ago, we were invited, and this was the previous mayor, Gregor Robertson, who wanted a faith-based leadership group to come together to talk about the homeless crisis and what are the best ways that we can come together and share best practices about that humanitarian issue. And it was actually, the meeting that I attended was at Temple Shalom. So I'd never been to a synagogue, and he was very welcoming and it actually changed my paradigm, because up until that point, with the Muslim community, really focused on our Muslim community and not really kind of understanding other faith-based groups and visiting other faith-based groups. So that kind of broke a paradigm for me, because it was like, oh, we have a round table where we had priests and reverends from every denomination. We had some Muslim leaders and others from other communities. And it really kind of brought out that, hey, we can just be together and just talk about our issues, and everyone has ideas and everyone has solutions and everyone is doing great things, but let's share it together. And to go into this topic of security and safety is that, hey, we have a shared humanity. We have certain things that we do that maybe the others are doing similarly or different, and we can share best practices that can help each other's communities. So again, continuing that tradition to go into our call that we had with the Muslim leaders and sharing the best practices from the Jewish Federation on safety and security. So let's talk about the impetus and the obviously, for obvious reasons, with the rise of anti-Semitism as well, the increasing level of anti-Semitism because of online hate. So these are big issues. So wherever you want to start, please go ahead.
Sure. And I just want to say, it's to hear what you're saying is great and wonderful, because, unfortunately, people I guess tribalism causes people to think about the differences between them and others. But when you and I speak about different sayings that are similar in the Islamic tradition and the Jewish tradition and other things, and if we look just like the DNA of people, our DNA is 99.9% the same as everybody on Earth. Exactly. 99.99%, I think, is the same for everybody on Earth. Exactly. I bet you the things that Muslims and Jews do are 99.9% the same, and yet we focus on the differences, which really there's no I can't understand why we focus on it so much. Maybe it makes news, and you talked about the internet. We can talk about that later, but really we should focus on the similarities, because there's so many similarities between us, and even rituals. Rituals are just rituals. They're not the essence of our values. They're not the essence of who we are. They're just rituals, and maybe those are different. But anyway, security, yeah. Unfortunately, I agree with you. The internet, like any invention that humans have created since they began, the invention of fire, being able to start a fire and use it to cook things and to warm themselves, but you could also use fire to destroy someone else's hut or their home. So every invention has always had a positive and a negative, and unfortunately, the internet has got wonderful positives, but it's also got terrible negatives, and the ability of people to anonymously say things and start conspiracy theories and to make accusations without any accountability whatsoever has been a problem, and it became a larger and larger problem, and it's hard for us to see why anti-Semitism consistently raises its ugly head, and it's because people focus on differences and they want to feel superior to somebody else, and whatever the reasons. In our North American society, Jews are quite integrated into society, and they're that every aspect and every level of intellectuals, but actually the poor. I mean, we're so integrated. We speak the language. We don't look different. Most of us, and yet people have this, have this hate of Jews just because, and it's it's been like that for forever, and unfortunately you try to eradicate it, it doesn't go away. So I think the internet caused the latest flare-up, or certainly assisted in the latest flare-ups, and we felt by about 6 or 7 years ago that things, we needed to worry about our security, and so the Jewish Federation of Greater Vancouver, and you mentioned I was the chair of that from 2005 to 2007. So I've had that position. I've had most of the other positions in the federation and other Jewish organizations. They decided that we need to take the leadership role on it. But what do you do? I mean, we've got a police department, and we can call the police when something really goes wrong. But people were not feeling secure. They were feeling that there was threats, and there was concerns about what might happen, and are our children safe going to schools. So basically what we did was we created a committee and just said, go figure out what we should do. And so we started in 2015, and we started creating some rules, or some mandates for ourselves, and some thoughts about how we could accomplish things. And we worked at it for a while, for about a year and a half, 2 years. And we realized that, I mean, I am not a security expert by any stretch, but I had leadership roles in the community, and was able to chair a meeting in a way that something can get done rather than just argue with each other, which some people are prone to do, just keep fighting about things. And so I kind of keep meetings going forward and coming up with compromise solutions and results. So that was the reason I was asked to be the chair of that committee, not because I have any security knowledge, which I still don't after all these years, but I have a little more than I had before. And we started with an assessment of the main building in the Jewish community, where Jewish organizations are housed, and it's used by all kinds of people in the community, not just the Jewish community. It's got a theater, it's got a swimming pool, it's got gym, it's got offices, it's got an auditorium. And so it's, a multi-use community center that was built by the Jews and supported by the Jewish community, but is being used by all kinds of people for all kinds of reasons. And so we had an assessment of that building done by a professional organization, and they came up with something which made us realize that it isn't very secure, and we really needed to have much better security at that building. And we tried to raise some money in order to carry out some of those, not all, because there was a lot, but some of the most basic security arrangements. But the biggest security arrangement that we felt we had to make was to have a security guard in front of the door at all times. And it's really unfortunate that we felt we had to do it, but it's actually very fortunate that we did it, because in the 6 years since, the situation has gotten much worse in terms of anti-Semitism, and we're thinking not so much of a terrorist group that would attack, but more sort of lone persons who may be mentally unstable, who've been changed or convinced by the internet that anti-Semitism that they read, that they have to do something against us. And so that's been the kind of tragedy that's been happening over the last 5 or 6 years, is that someone, a lone person comes in with a gun into a synagogue, a lone person comes in with a gun into a mosque, and starts shooting and kills people. And so with security guard and some other security, it was felt that the Jewish Community Center was much safer. And in fact, when people got more and more worried about things, there were places in Jewish communities in North America where they simply stopped going to Jewish organizational buildings, like day schools and nursery schools and community centers, just because they were afraid, because there would be somebody phoned up and said that there was going to be a bombing, or somebody said that the children aren't safe there. And by having preemptively put in some special measures, we were able to prevent that from happening in Vancouver. But we also realized that it was just scratching the surface, and that we needed much more than just one building to be secured. And of course, just like the Muslim community with many mosques, we have many synagogues, we have other, you've got a place where you have food distribution center, which is by your community. We've got that too. So all these different places where Jews were known to be, we realized we needed some help with some security measures. And so, as I said on the program, we hired a director of security in 2017, and told him what the mandate was. And he's got a lot of work, and he started looking at different organizations and events. We have events where many people come together, either for a concert or for a special prayers or holidays, and those people needed to know that they would be secure in gathering together and not just be a target for somebody who is meaning to do harm. So that director of security became very busy, starting looking at all the buildings and whether we rent them or own them, the organizations, and safety procedures, and also helping to train people through events. And I discussed it, and Daniel Haydenreich Davis, who is our director of security, not only discussed it, but also offered further time. And I think you've met him, or others have met him again since then. And we as a community and our committee has decided that we want to help other communities, particularly the Muslim community, because of the problems you've had in the past couple of years, starting with Quebec Mosque, and of course in the terrible tragedy in London of about a month or two ago. We realized that you need the same thing as we do. I mean, we're all in this together, and our experience can help us. So I actually approached the VPD and said to them, the Muslim community in our in Vancouver really could benefit from our experience, because we've now been doing it for 6 years. And so, we have suggestions for them about how to organize and what to do, and the fact that they need a director of securities as well. And so when they created their seminar, they invited us to speak, and we were just so happy to do so, because we actually approached them to say, this is important for our communities, for our greater Vancouver community, that we help others with our experience, and show and shortcut what it might take for you to get to where we are in terms of feeling safe in our community buildings and in our community locations and in our events. And so hopefully that's started now, and it's going to continue. And I know that Daniel even said that he knows somebody that you might want to consider. And I know it's a costly thing. Unfortunately, all of our communities, it's become a cost of life that security has become an issue. The other thing is, in the last couple of years, just before COVID started, luckily enough, we also created a subcommittee called the Cybersecurity Subcommittee, which helps organizations secure their own, gives best, let's say, gives best practices for organizations to look at their own online data protection and communications and see if they can prevent a breach. And so we've got that as well, in addition to physical security guidelines and help. So yes, again, it's expensive, but that's another resource that I want your community to know about, that we can help you with some best practices. And there are a lot of best practices out there if you know where to look for them. But my committee has cybersecurity experts on it, so they really kind of hone it down to things that were really relevant to our organizations.
And absolutely, and you brought up these recent events that have happened, and in history, we used to look at certain shooters as lone wolves, but what we're realizing, I'll give you an example with the Quebec shooter. The research behind the person was, again, watching a lot of videos on YouTube, anti-Muslim, the new change for the president previous to this current one in the US. And so, and that rhetoric influenced that individual, and it was online hate. And what it is, even though he was a lone shooter, however, there's an audience or a group that is egging on this type of ideology of, killing Muslims or other communities online. And it's not just a few people, it's thousands, tens of thousands, in some cases hundreds of thousands or more people that have these groups online. And a lot of the hate, like there are these groups called or forums, 8kun or 4chan, or a number of different places where the ideology, the white supremacist ideology, which is called the Great Replacement Theory. So there's some sort of conspiracy theory that somehow Jews and Muslims and other racialized minorities are taking over, and in the case of what they're advocating against the Muslim community is kill them all, men, women, and children. That's what they're advocating. And so again, young, impressionable, this person, he came, and while people are praying, and people that go to prayer, as you know, they're just going to connect. Everyone's got their families, they've got their, other business, whatever they're doing, but they're there to do worship. And what struck us, because it struck close to home, and it created a lot of fear as well, when people are shot in the back when they're going to the mosque, and then several people were injured. So some were disabled because of the shooter. And so there's a lot of reluctance for people to go back to the mosque, because you're like, oh, to go with your kids, and you is this going to be a copycat? Is something going to happen? And sadly enough, a couple, 3 years later, 2017, this other shooter. Now, this is what the scary part is. So in New Zealand, again, the same theory, Great Replacement Theory, all those group chats, on his weapon was the name of the Quebec shooter, as well as other right-wing extremists or far people that espouse this theory. And so this person put up a manifesto, and he spent 2 years planning the Christchurch attacks. He got the schematics for the mosque. He had drones flying over the mosque to kind of surveil it. He went dressed as, in the Islamic clothing to the mosques. He traveled to Muslim countries. Like, he spent 2 years on this. And you think to yourself, why somebody hates so much that he spends this type of effort. And then one of the shocking, my apologies, my daughter's in the background. So one of the shocking thing we learned is that they also have, forums that where they try and get around these social media algorithms. So one of the codes that they use to talk about killing Muslims, and this is going to sound funny. So this is research from Google. So Google has a shared resource that we can share with you as well called Jigsaw, which is about search terms to the postal codes of hate searches, whether it's anti-Semitism or anti-Muslim or anti-Black. So the number 1, 2, and 3 search term for hate in Canada is kebab removal, which sounds kind of funny. And then remove kebab. And then the third is kill all Muslims. And sadly, the fourth one is also kill all Jews. So it's, we occupy 1, 2, and 3. And these are again, white supremacist organizations. So what that means is that, when we researched it, that is actually an anthem that Serbian generals used to play this song when they were killing Bosnian Muslims. So that was like an anthem that they would play. And the actual Christchurch shooter, he was playing that song when he was going to the mosques to perpetrate his shooting. So they have their terminology, they have their philosophy, they have their manifestos, and they're not lone wolves. They have thousands, hundreds of thousands of people online that are egging them on, cheering them on in real time, because this guy, he live streamed it. So he had a camera, he live streamed it. People were watching in real time when he did it. So I personally, I think, was affected by post-traumatic stress when I watched the video. I just opened it randomly, like somebody said, "Oh, this thing happened," and then you watch it, and it's just like you see, he's just killing people with no hesitation, no hesitation. Like he was just like, and I saw people that he was shooting look like, people that I would know, like people that were just common family people. And it was just so brutal and literally physically made me sick, emotionally sick. And again, it brings up fear that should we even go to the mosque? Like that was a fear in our community. But the silver lining in all this with after Quebec and after New Zealand was the support from the community, the Jewish community, Christian community, people that aren't religious that came to our mosques, that visited with flowers, with cards, and really showing their empathy and their concern. And so it heartened us that people felt the sorrow, felt the pain, and were there to be with us in our time of sorrow. And on the flip side, when what happened in Pittsburgh it was Pittsburgh, right? The trip. So we went to the Jewish Community Center for a memorial there, and it was just a way that the Jewish community visited us. We as a Muslim community visited the Jewish community, because these are sorrowful events, and we as friends and neighbors need to come together and really be there for one another to hopefully prevent these type of things happening, which we're doing with this podcast, what we've done in previous work. So I want to carry it forward in our perspective, that we appreciate this coming together and sharing like minds to really for community service and community security. So we appreciate you joining us for this.
Well, it's my pleasure. And I just a couple of comments. Number one, I think there's a lot of different areas that we can work together. The federal liberal government tabled Bill C-36, which I've had a look at. It's so difficult to balance between free speech and between what people should not be saying and cannot be saying. I agree that there are thousands of people around the world who are hateful and want to hurt us, all racialized people. And yet, I think they've always been there, but now the internet gives them an opportunity to feel that they're supported, that they're not alone. And somehow we've got to figure out how to bring them back to the place where they were alone and not being egged on and not being supported and cheered in a world. And I'm not sure what that is, but if there's a technological fix, maybe we can push the giants, technology companies to do something which catches it more quickly. The other thing is, I think there are things we can do together with respect to talking about the kinds of things that the government can do in terms of not allowing these this kind of language. I mean, AI is excellent at finding out which, and you just said the name of a place that they can figure out that there's code words, and AI can do that quite well. And I think all the giant platforms have that ability to find out what there is. There is actually an anti-hate, and I can't remember the name. There's an anti-hate organization based in London and in Washington, which is monitoring hate speech. And I saw this in BBC just a week ago, that they see hate speech against organizations, against racialized groups and religious groups, and they will write to the platforms, Twitter or Facebook or Google, and they say, this is hate speech that's going to cause harm, take it down. And what they found was, and this is an organization that was, I think, started by a Muslim, and I can't remember his name, but that organization said that 82% of the times that they wrote to one of the giants and said, this is hate speech against the identifiable group, you should take it down, they didn't take it down. So, I think that, and I can actually send you an email with more specific information about that. I'm thinking that we, as religions outside of the mainstream racialized groups, we should band together to tell the government, you've got to at least hold those platforms accountable. If somebody who knows what they're talking about, is accredited an organization who's doing good, trying to find hate speech online, tells a platform that this is hate speech, you should take it down, and they don't, I think that's where the penalty should lie. I mean, I know that doesn't get to the underlying problem of people, but it helps stop providing them with a platform where they can spew what they're spewing. And so,
agreed. A financial penalty for the platforms by not taking it down. There's the European Code of Conduct. If something is flagged to the social media giants, they have 24 hours to take it down, but they haven't done that in Canada. And so I'll share with you also all our research, like from Google, all the terms, all the data, because I think it would be, and also how many white supremacist groups there are. You probably already have this, but how many there are, where they're active, what search terms by the province, and even in British Columbia down to the postal code. And then we could even connect you. This is also a London, UK-based group that is called Moonshot, and they're the ones that have this data, and the VPD uses this data, and the person that introduced us, Terry Young, I believe is on your board. Terry Young
on our security committee, yes.
On your security board, so you have a very diverse group consulting with. But yeah, we want to share that data as well.
Right, and we should probably make joint applications or submissions to the government to say, these communities are the affected communities. We both think that this is what you should be doing, and agreed. I think that would have a much stronger effect.
So we have allyship with the Chinese National Council for Social Justice, and because of the rise in anti-Asian hate because of the coronavirus, and here's some of the stuff that we learned there. So the hate that they're getting is people are saying you're all agents of communist China, and you're sleeper cells. Similar stuff to the Muslims, like being the way that they try and portray us. And so they're feeling that. So they've kind of come together. So in allyship with them, they have some interesting research that they've done with AI and anti-Asian hate terms. And then there's the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, which is also a few lawyers that also have some best practices and what they're doing to lobby these various these anti-hate legislation that they're working on. So there's two parts of legislation they're working on, one for the province of British Columbia, and then there's the federal legislation. And we are working with the parliamentary secretary for anti-racism initiatives. Her name is Rachna Singh, and so they want consultation from our communities on their legislation. So that's another takeaway that we can work on, is provincially and federally, and hopefully one can inform the other or vice versa.
No, these are fantastic things that we can work on together. I have a full-time job. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
It's balancing community life, family life, and work, and all those things is becomes. I mean, I've always done it, but we all need more volunteers to make sure, who are interested and involved and can do this
within our capacities. Like, we have our respective businesses and responsibilities, but it is an existential issue for all of us, and that's why we're giving its due. Because again, sometimes you're like, who's working on this? Who's working on this? And then you're like, oh, I guess we got to do it, and so that's kind of where we've it is heartfelt, and we do know that really focusing on just the needs of one community versus in allyship in community, we can come together, is more powerful than just one community going it alone.
Absolutely agree that it's much more powerful, and we get more resources and more abilities and a wider variety of pool for volunteers to work on it together.
Agreed. And so I know we typically do about an hour for our podcast, and there's a lot to discuss, but let's consider this part one. I'm sure part two could be after we've kind of delivered certain things on our respective ends to really help our communities. But I really appreciate you taking your time and us getting to know you, and we will follow up with those emails with the resources and share with you the legislation that we're kind of helping inform provincially and federally, and how we can all collaborate.
And we'll do the same. Thank you so much. It was a real honor.